Hey guys, Sean Mahoney here talking about my emerging technologies project. For my emerging technologies, I chose the CSS Grid and CSS Flexbox. The reason these are emerging technologies is they're relatively new rules, Grid very new. Um, so I ran into some issues even with browser support, which you can see. And if we look at can I use here, we can see that Flexbox is green everywhere, very widely supported. It's been out since about 2011 and had pretty widespread browser usage since about 2013. When we get over to the grid table, there's a lot of red on here. And in fact, Edge is still behind the Microsoft prefix. You can see on the dates here, Firefox started just about a month and a half ago. Chrome now has it in version 57 from a month and a half ago. Otherwise, you have to use the browser flags. Safari, this just came out, this version about a month ago. So it is a very new technology, the CSS grid layout. So what I did here is I made a website. It's essentially a tutorial. The user would be someone who is already in web development, understands CSS, understands HTML, but needs a little bit of extra and really wants to get into some frameworks that we don't really even use here at LSC. I haven't been taught any of these, so I had to go out and kind of learn them on my own. So on the home page, we kind of talk about using floats and tables and how that doesn't work and how things aren't responsive. And then here's where it starts getting kind of fun. I have a disclaimer letting people know that Grid does not have widespread browser support. And then there's a link here to go to the page I made called Browser Help. And what's kind of neat about this page is I use some JavaScript to identify what browser you're using. See right here, it knows that I'm on Chrome. And then it actually gives a few instructions on how to turn on those experimental web features for that particular browser. So if we take a look here, I will show you. If I open my browser help now in Firefox, it'll take a minute because I never use Firefox, so it always takes a minute to load. But you'll see now it knows that you're using Firefox and gives you a set of instructions on how to enable grid in Firefox. And it actually works with several different browsers. It even goes back to if someone's using Internet Explorer for some reason. It'll let you know, and I actually have to allow block content for that, but it'll let you know you're using Internet Explorer and that Internet Explorer is old and Grid is new, and it gives you a link to go upgrade to do Microsoft Edge instead. And the way I did this, I found this neat little thing called Bowser.js, which parses through a bunch of different elements of the browser and can then return some various information about the browser, including the name of it, and if we really wanted to, we could look at the version number as well. So when you look into my code here, I basically made a different bit of HTML for each different regularly used browser of Chrome, IE, Firefox, Edge, and Opera, and Safari. And then we just have a little thing down here checking to see, if the little if-else statement, and we look for the name of it, and then we change that inner HTML to match. So that was kind of fun to write. Took me a while to find that Bowser in order to do what I needed to, and luckily it was free. So we can take a look back here at my budget, which I actually stuck to the dollar. Is used CodePen Pro, which I'll show you in a minute, which allows you to embed these interactive, they're called pens, where I've written some code and then it's got a little window, rendering of the code, and then the user is able to change that code and see how it affects the rendering. I bought this $8 ebook here from a book apart about CSS grid layout. This Rachel Andrews is a very early adopter, and she wrote a great book about it. I also used one of her websites as a resource. And then, of course, $15 for the domain name and $60 for hosting, which in this case I already have. The site is live right now on my website, SeanTMahoney.com. You just go /framework_fun. That'll take you to the home page. So then also on the home page, and I actually used Flexbox quite a bit in designing this. These boxes here are written using Flexbox. And then at the bottom, we just have a little thing about the make a choice section. So jump over to the Flexbox page. Got a little tutorial, a little header here about what a parent element is, what the child elements are. And we have our first CodePen here showing how this works. Displaying our flex direction. I kind of teach what all the different elements are. So here's what I was talking about, the CodePen. On the right side here we have the result of your code. And over here you just have the code as written. And so if a user wants to mess around and say like, well, what if instead of space around I change it to space between, they can do that. And it re-renders the code as such. Or what if instead of having this in a row, I have it in a column? It immediately shows the result there. So as I go through the tutorials here, I do, tell the user some different things to try to see how these different elements work, and teach all about Flexbox. And then I also have a page that does that exact same thing for the grid layout. And here's where things get really interesting. As I was saying earlier, grid's not fully adopted yet. W3C hasn't got a mandate on how it's going to work, so we're even running into just like inter-browser issues. So this was the first major issue that I ran into, which was that as I was writing this code, these 3 lines here work great in Chrome and Firefox and Opera, and as of about a month and a half ago, Safari. But Edge is difficult and uses this MS flag, so we have to flag all the tags for Microsoft so that it'll run in Edge, which caused me to have to write all of my code a couple times, which in these little ones here was not a big deal. I just kind of made a real simple layout here, but you really get into trouble where most browsers recognize this style of declaring a column that spans 2 columns, whereas Microsoft is making you declare a column in 1 line and then how many columns that spans in a second one. So I try to mention this over and over again to let people know that it's different and to keep checking back. And in fact, when you get to the bottom here, I even have some resources for like the Microsoft Dev Guide, a couple other places where you can check out some information about Grid to keep an eye on browser support. So here, as you can see, where I made a little bit more of a complex design here using the grid layout. My code did get pretty long here. It ended up being, I think, 94 lines, and that's because you have to write everything twice. So that was kind of a pain, but it's in the end it all worked. Here you can see again too, that Microsoft is, if you have a repeating, I have this 1 frame thing repeating 12 times. This is the way everyone else is doing it right now. This is the way Microsoft is doing it. So you kind of have to learn everything twice. But it's a good thing for developers to get into this stuff on the ground floor. While it's like this, you get a chance to try writing things a couple different ways. And as the people are making their recommendations to the W3C, you can kind of weigh in on that and say, this works for me, this didn't work for me, we should do things this way, maybe we should try it that way. But, so as you can see, as we dig into the code here, on every page, this is another thing I had to learn. I didn't know how to do a favicon before I did this. Favicon is this little thing that appears up in your browser tab. And I'd never, I use them in WordPress all the time, but I never had to actually write one. So I found a couple of resources for that, where you design one, then upload it, and it returns all these different file extensions and everything for you that you can use. But I was able to stick on schedule pretty well. The only things that slowed me down, like I said, was rewriting a bunch of that that MS code. Took a while to kind of understand. I learned how to do everything from a couple different resources, and all of these codes worked for that. And then I had to go learn it all again. To see how Microsoft was doing everything. And then like I said, as we continue to kind of explain everything here, you can see this, I mean, a layout like this using grid now, I mean, this really, once I understood how to write grid, only took me about maybe 10 or 15 minutes to design this. If you can imagine trying to get these buckets to line up inside of here, and getting this sidebar to extend all the way to the bottom, using floats and things like that, I mean, it would be a nightmare. So I'm really excited about these grid rules, and hoping to get to use them in our day-to-day here soon. On the browser help, I already showed you guys. The last page is this make a choice, like should I use grid or should I use Flexbox? And then we talk about the differences, and the big thing being the Flexbox is kind of a one-dimensional thing that it is really good for a row of elements, or like I showed you on my home page there, having these two boxes next to each other. And you can see as we if you resize the browser here, that's where Flexbox is really useful. It will continue to make these things the same size. They'll fit perfectly. They stay in the middle. Nothing breaks. I think I wrote a media query at some point to, maybe I didn't, but you could write a media query to say, like, all right, that's too long and skinny, this is looking ridiculous, and then have it pop down below. It's a lot easier than kind of hoping that your float's going to work and things get sort of jagged and out of order. The other thing that I really loved about grid as well is grid, your element order doesn't really matter. Kind of show you here. As you write all this CSS, what you're doing is you're declaring a grid on your screen. So in this case, we have 12 columns across and then 10 rows long. You don't even see them. You just imagine that they're there. And then you put things in order. So as you look at your header element, I've got my header element starting at row 1, column 1, which is your top corner here, spanning across all 12 of the columns we made, and then it's 2 rows high. And if you look at the next element, the nav element, it starts on row 3, it starts on column 2, so that's how we get it nice and centered like that. We only go across 10, leaving the 12th one empty. So it's really very simple. And as you dig into this, you find out you can actually name, you don't have to use numbers, you can name them if you want to name like first, second, Ohio, you can name it whatever you want. So that is my project. Like I said, it's live on my website here, shantimahoney.com. If you just go to /CSS-framework-fun, it'll take you to the home page, and you can go through the tutorial yourself, try it out, see if you learn anything, see what you like. Thanks a lot.